When matching wine with food, there's a lot of different things to consider. And of course, a lot of it's related to the amount of acidity and sweetness, the body of the dish, all of that. And of course, the seasoning is also one of the key factors. So today I've raided my spice cabinet and I want to talk to you about how to match wines with the different seasonings that you might use on your food. I always like to use the rule of thumb that if you're looking at regional food and wine pairing, think about traditional herbs from a place and the traditional wines that you might also find there. If I'm making Italian food, I want to be thinking about using those traditional herbs from Italy, but also classic Italian grape varietals or wines. A good example of that would be a Super Tuscan. I love Super Tuscan with a great herb roasted steak, with pasta, all those things that pop with those Italian herbal flavors. So now let's talk about Asian flavors. And Asian is a very, very broad category. Typically when we're talking about Asian herbs and spices, we're talking about things that are very aromatic. So looking first to Southeast Asia, which is really the great place to me for looking at herbal flavors. You see a lot of very fresh flavors, also a real intense mix of flavors. You get like fresh herbs and dried herbs and aromatic things and spice, sometimes bitterness, sweetness, acidity. You kind of get it all. And this is where I like to go with a wine that has a real delicacy to it. Something that's also very pretty and aromatic, like Gewürztraminer. I mean, Gewürztraminer, it's very floral, it's very perfumey, and this is really a wine that is enhanced by these aromatic herbs and also brings out those flavors. Great combination. So let's talk about actually incorporating heat in your dish. Not just these aromatic spices, but actual spice. Now, certain wines will amplify those flavors. In particular, anything with a lot of alcohol or a lot of tannin is going to really become hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, if you're a masochist and you love the burn, go for Cabernet with your spicy food. But if you're somebody who wants a little bit of refreshment, think about some other wines. So if you're cooking with things like jalapeno peppers, which are extremely green, have that really vibrant green, kind of almost bell pepper flavor to them, you want to think about wines that also have a lot of greenness to them. Sauvignon Blanc is a perfect example. Sauvignon Blanc is really great with jalapenos. But there's other kinds of peppers. So think about if you're cooking with fresh red peppers. They're going to be a lot spicier, not quite as green flavored. There's some intensity there. Maybe not necessarily wanting to go with a very green tasting wine. Paprika, when used with a lot of intensity, can also have a very strong flavor to it. It can also make wines taste a little bit bitter, so think about that when you're pairing. Calabrian Chilies, I love these things. Chef Matt also loves Calabrian Chilies. You'll find those kind of peppered throughout our menu in a very subtle way that just adds a nice smokiness and a flavor without being too terribly spicy. Chipotle Peppers. Chipotle is a smoked chili, and that smokiness is really great with the right kinds of wine. So imagine if you're having Chipotle and you're having beef. Think about a great big smoky dark wine. Something like Shiraz is awesome with all of these kinds of red chilies. Again, bearing in mind how hot the dish is. If it's really spicy, you may not want to go with that big, peppery, smoky, spicy wine. You may want to consider something a little bit more delicate, or just go for a beer. You can't go wrong there either. Now let's talk about actual pepper. Now, pepper itself has a lot of flavors. Lots of different colored peppercorns out there, and each of them are different. In particular, you find things like Szechuan pepper that has a real burn to it. White pepper, a lot of heat to this stuff. Real intense flavors, very different from black pepper, which is super earthy and dark. I like black pepper with wines that have a lot of black pepper. Syrah is a great example of that. So same with Shiraz, same with Petite Syrah, you get the idea. White pepper, I like that more with white wines. I think there's a real delicacy to the flavor profile to that, as well as the heat that makes it stand up better with whites. So now let's move on to curry. Now, curry is a really broad category. There is no single spice called curry. Curry is a blend, many different flavors, and you find these all throughout the world, particularly in the Middle East. All of these things are so incredibly complex, really intense flavors. You ever go out to Indian food and you see every dish is so distinctive in its flavor, really powerful. So I like to think about wines that aren't going to overwhelm these flavors. I really want to showcase them, but also make my wine taste better. I like wines like Chenin Blanc. I don't know if you remember our South African Chenin Blanc. Beautiful with curries. It's got this kind of golden apple flavor that's really enhanced by these. Sweeter wines like Riesling, Muscat can certainly work with these as well. Nice combination of really aromatic spices, maybe some heat, maybe not. And then the earthiness of that really plays off well too. I also like Syrah. You see, I'm kind of coming back to the same things. Wines have a lot of spice, a lot of aromatics to it. Shiraz, Petite Syrah. Cab Zin is really great with Indian food too. Really firm dark fruit from the Cabernet and that real juicy spicy flavor that you get from the Zinfandel. It's delicious. Other things that I like with all spicy foods, sparkling wine. You can't go wrong. Something that has a lot of acidity to it and bubbles, the effervescence really becomes a palate cleanser. So especially if you are having curries, we're going back and forth between all these different flavors. This is really great in between every sip. Now, let's move on to this last category of flavors, which is really more umami. Umami is that really savory characteristic that you get off of things like mushrooms. It's a great example of umami. In fact, I even like to use dried mushrooms in my cooking. It adds an earthiness and a richness and umami to a dish. These are really a great flavor enhancers for older red wines. White wines certainly work well with these too. You can go with things like older whites. Older Chardonnay is pretty delicious with those umami flavors, or even older Riesling. Yeah, that stuff ages too. So you can see there's really a wide range of flavors that you can draw from in your spice cabinet. And then once you're thinking about these flavor profiles, think about how much acidity is in your dish and how hearty the dish is and whether you want to go red or white and how powerful you want your wine to be in comparison to how intensely flavored your food is. I love the spice box. Lots of fun stuff here, great flavors that all can enhance your wine. So cheers, happy cooking.